Dear loved ones, let's open up the Bibles today to the book of 2 Samuel, from where we're going to read from chapter 21. 2 Samuel chapter 21, starting with verse 15. 2 Samuel chapter 21, starting with verse 15. When the Philistines were at war again with Israel, David and his servants with him went down and fought against the Philistines. And David grew faint. Then Ishbi-benob, who was one of the sons of the giant, the weight of whose bronze spear was 300 shekels, who was bearing a new sword, thought he could kill David. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, came to his aid, and struck the Philistine and killed him. Then the men of David swore to him, saying, "You shall go out no more with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel." Now it happened afterwards that there was again a battle with the Philistines at Gob. Then Sibbecai the Husathite killed Saph, who was one of the sons of the giant. Again there was war at Gob with the Philistines, where Elhanan the son of Jareg Origim the Bethlehemite killed the brother of Goliath the Hittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. Yet again there was a war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature, who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number, and he was also born to the giant. So when he defied Israel, Jonathan the son of Shimea, David's brother, killed him. These 4 were born to the giant in Gath, and fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants. Amen. Let's all sit back down. Then there was a battle in Gob with the Philistines. Verse 19 says, "Again there was a war at Gob with the Philistines." Verse 20, "Yet again there was a war at Gath with the Philistines." And the battles were never ending. They are never ending. And we need to answer a simple question today. Where are those men who once were? Where are the men who are no more? When they killed those Philistines for that plot of land, they maybe thought to themselves, is it worth fighting so much over this? I don't think it's necessarily the plot of land that they were fighting for. Women ask, where are those men, those strong men that used to be? Who, for that principle of not seeing anything taken away from themselves, from their families, they were ready to kill everything and everyone. Those strong men who once were, where are they? This question shouldn't be asked by women except with great care, in the sense that if you ask a question to a modern-day woman, and the modern-day woman asks, where are the men who once were, then just as well you can ask the same question in reverse, where are the women that once were? Because not a single man can come back from battle against the Philistines all full of blood after he was hacking left and right with a sword, without an ear, without maybe an eye plucked out, and a broken arm or whatever, and he finds his wife sitting at home on Instagram, scrolling through Facebook. So if we ask for men to go out and fight and battle, then women should probably act a bit differently too. Our problem nowadays is, I talked with my students about this, and my sermon is a follow-up of the discussions that I had with my students a couple days ago about the things that we've been looking at in the Bible. We were talking about how something's happening. For a couple of years now, the role of women in society is more and more aggressive. And the moment when the woman wins more and more ground, she is demonized in the sense that it says that, women no longer see their place. For example, the greatest Adventist church in the world, the greatest Romanian Adventist church in the world, is in Loma Linda. They chose themselves a female pastor. And for our Adventist brothers, the light was closed as well, because all the Adventist churches received their light from this great church at Loma Linda, who now has a female pastor as head of the church. A bunch of women gatherings, they're not that bad, right? In our church, we have women gatherings, women meetings on Saturdays, here and there. We don't have that many men meetings though, right? Men aren't really taken care of in the same way at our church. And it's clear that we are widowed. Danny Drumia, for example, one of our pastors, is also frustrated over this. And it's almost easier to organize a meeting with the women at church than one with the men. But today, this morning, I come with a question towards you guys and some answers to try and settle down all the women in our church. I consider that all this aggression, for example, I said that at most in 20 years, the Neo-Protestant churches in Romania will be pastored by women in a great proportion. Take it as a prophecy if we're still alive to see it. The fact that it's not the women to be blamed. The women have sat down in the place that they saw as empty, in the place where the man has left. There's no man anymore. There's an empty chair, and our sisters have taken charge and taken it. So where are the men that once were? And I want to speak as a man that looks towards the future as much as possible with a critical outview, and look towards our past to see the mistakes that we've made, where we are today, and try to see the trend that will happen in the future. And so I don't blame you guys at all. I don't blame the women. You guys were created to try and experiment, and men were created to resist. The whole blame of everything that's happening wrong, think about it, in the European Parliament, led disastrously by a woman. The Council in Europe, the Vice President of the Parliament in Europe is imprisoned. She was also a woman because of bribery. The European Union has never been led in a more wrong way. And honestly, if God wants to use women to destroy Europe, may He do so. But I want to let you guys know that there's a problem with the men here, of the lack of men. And so my sermon is entitled very simply tonight, Where are the men who once were? Dear loved ones, strong churches. The strong churches come from strong families. Strong families come from strong men, from strong fathers. If you don't have strong men, you don't have strong families. If you don't have strong families, you don't have strong churches. If you don't have strong churches, you don't have a strong society. And so it's a complete disaster, a fantastic chaos, disaster. The moment you tie up your shirt wrong, right? You skip a button, or you misalign your buttons with the holes, and then suddenly you look at yourself in the mirror and you look like a mess. Due to the lack of proper strong men. And because of this, the families are destroyed, society is destroyed, the church is destroyed. I want to let you guys know that a woman exists. There's a woman. Women exist. Men, though, men have to be made. And so I'll look more towards that area of the church, the area of the men. Men need to become men. Women exist. We, though, as men, when we come into the world, we're not finished. We come into the world incomplete, and we need to work to become men. This is something we have to face, we have to deal with as men. Feminism, for those of you that have studied in the past few years, the emancipation of women started around the year 1955 towards early 60s, after the war. And this feminism movement did nothing more than change man into what women wanted. And the big problem is that women nowadays no longer like the result that they fought for. Women have changed men so much in the past few years that nowadays they can't stand the men that they've created. That is why, for example, if you search on pornographic websites, when women search pornography online, they usually search for lesbians because they cannot stand the man that they've created anymore. Because ultimately this process that they started in early 1960s, that has been going on for the past 60 years, it has resulted in the destruction of a woman's desire to have a proper man. And now they cry about it. Where are the men who once were? And the metrosexual was created. When we speak about a metrosexual in the Romanian language, the word for a metrosexual in the dictionary, it's known more commonly as a tom girl. This is the word in the dictionary. It's not a... And when we speak about metrosexuals, I want us all to understand this properly. when I speak about men, I don't consider that the ideal man is the one that sits at home in a vest, has a belly, burps, who eats sunflower seeds, spits them at you, and beats his wife in his apartment with the door fridge. I don't consider that that guy is a man. I don't consider that individual a man. I consider him a wild beast from the jungle, from a forest who's not been domesticated. He's an animal who, by chance, he's not stuck in a cage at his zoo just because he happens to not have been caught yet. A skunk who does not wash himself, a wild animal. So this we start from this idea, right, from this premise. So the opposite of what a man should be is a metrosexual or a tom girl. And this is the great realization that women have accomplished in the past 60 years. We're not speaking about sexual orientation right now. For example, David Beckham for boys, for those of you that remember football, might be their idol. But David Beckham is a heterosexual who I believe has about 3 kids. We're not speaking about sexual orientation. When I, as a pastor, Vladimir Pustan says metrosexual, don't think about sexual orientation. Think about a tom girl. What does this mean? It's the man, the boy that shaves his hair off, goes to tanning beds, the man who wears cucumber masks on his face to have a nice skin, the man who paints his nails, the man who annoys every woman because he's taken up their spot at the salon. You're going to a beauty salon, you want to make yourself beautiful, but you can't because there's a man sitting on the chair. He's taken your spot, has booked it up for the next few weeks. They get their manicure done, their pedicures done. You find these men in shopping centers, walking around aimlessly, looking to see what new things have come up, to buy a new shirt, a new thing, a new that. These tom girls created by our modern society are the ones that make the distinction between colors and tones. So the man knows that's a red. And now a metrosexual says, no, it's a petrolic red. Oh, look at this cappuccino color. Not brown, this cappuccino color. What color is that cappuccino? What color is turquoise? For example, how can a man say something is turquoise? Come on now. For us, it's clear. Anyway, they are those boys who haven't grown up in one way or another fully. Let me explain to you what's up with these men. God created the family in the following way: a man and a woman in a boat. Let me use this imagery. The man rows the boat on the right-hand side and the woman on the left-hand side. All right? When the man rows the boat on the right-hand side, that means you have bread in your household. When the woman rows the boat on the left-hand side, that means children in the household. Today, both of them are rowing the boat on the right-hand side, both trying to bring bread into the household. And the boat is spinning in a circle. No children. Both of them are fighting over the right-hand row. Both of them working, going to work in the morning, or working remotely at home, starting a business, running the business, and the boat is spinning in a circle. What were the causes that has brought us here? And I want to speak about Romania today. How is it that we no longer have men in our churches? Men in our churches, for women to search the internet long and wide, and for women to grab hold of the leadership positions in our churches. Those men that you don't find them anymore. I call men to help work in the projects at our church. I call you guys to come and lend a working hand. And I see women show up to help. We're talking about pouring concrete and manual labor, strong, like heavy duty stuff. And the women show up, the men are busy. What were the causes that have brought us here? Firstly, the loss of interest over the education system, over school. Do you know why men have become inferior to women in Romania? Because all of a sudden women are now more educated than boys. For the first time in the history of Romania, the generation of my kids take part and have enjoyed less education and less culture than my generation, the parent generation. Usually, in the last 100 years, the next generation took part in more culture and more percentage-wise of education than the previous generation. Nowadays, it's for the first time in history when we as the parents had more school than our kids had. And this is the beginning of the end. And I'll tell you why. 70% of the worst grades in school are held by men, boys, males, without homework done. They are our boys. They're late to their lessons, the boys. 60% of university graduates are women. Only 40% of university graduates are men. The moment when in Romania, this is disastrous. It's not 50-50 anymore. It's not 50-50. It's not even 49-51%. It's not a marginal difference, but it's a huge gap, a huge difference between the males and the females, the boys and the girls. And so when boys have abandoned school without having finished high school or dropped out of university, when someone who's a doctor, let's say, a female doctor, a female who graduated university, marries someone who dropped out of high school, right? Someone who's highly educated, a highly educated woman marries a lower educated man who, out of love. Later on, who do you think is going to lead the family? This intellectual discrepancy will reflect itself in the household. And when I spoke about this to the youth of our church, I told them, when you marry someone, you don't want a massive discrepancy, a massive gap financially, for example, between the two, between you and your girlfriend, boyfriend, future wife, future husband. To find someone who is on the same level intellectually, culturally, because the bigger the discrepancies, the bigger the chances of divorce later on. Why do we not have men anymore? Firstly, they've abandoned school. Secondly, they've abandoned work. We considered work a curse, and all of a sudden men no longer want to work. Why? Because of firstly, the technological progress. Bogdan Iosifaru sent me a video of a 3D printer who can print, meat for you. Meat, proper meat. And our students from Iași showed us they made the first loaf of bread out of crickets with this printer. They only needed 40 crickets for a loaf of bread. So ultimately, it's just for a little bit of taste and flavor, right? Don't think of a loaf of bread filled with crickets. No, just 40 sprinkled across it, just for taste. Do you guys remember when we were kids and we used to catch crickets, right? Did you ever think of trying to taste one? No! Look, well, the day has come where you get to taste one. Thank you, students from Iași, because you guys have solved our great problem. Carry on down this line of stupidity, and you'll become greater idiots at the end of the day. Moving onwards, the moment when work has been abandoned and we work remote from home, our computer does everything in our place. There's no longer any more issues, any more problems. We can no longer take men outside the house to work because they consider it futile. And so the paradox arrives. He can go to the gym, he can take some skinny jeans on them, skinny trousers on them, and they move it, they do these movements and they pose and they take pictures and post on their stories at the gym, and not a single one of them works anymore. This is clear because we consider manual labor to go and crack some logs, to go to the forest and you fight with some bear right? Think about Samson. He went to his wife. He went to see his wife, his beautiful wife, and he met up down the road with a lion. Right, lions want to stop you from meeting with a beautiful woman. And he took the lion by the tail, knocked him across the ground. Right, you guys remember the story from the Bible, right? You don't know when the lions will appear out of nowhere. Why would you go and risk your life through a forest though, huh? You can FaceTime the girl nowadays. You don't need to go see her in real life and have to fight bears. The industry of health is also dominated by women in Romania. Nurses, medics, doctors, most of them are women. Men nowadays no longer help their parents either anymore. So the Tom girl can sit very relaxed at home, that you as his dad could crack the logs, and for him to couldn't care any less over the fact that you're working to ensure his comfort. He doesn't help his grandparents. And we've reached the point where, just like in the church in London 7 years ago when we opened up the church there, that out of desire to not work at all, do any manual labor, young 20-year-olds would marry an old 75 or so year old British native woman. What's the age gap between you two? 60 years. He would marry her, hear me out, because we had these problems in the church. He would marry with her in the hopes that she would die soon, or just for the simple fact for that woman to ensure his comfort and pay for him. This Pentecostal gigolo. How have we reached this state? Next, the excessive use of video games have also ruined men. But before this, if we're not going to work, right, they're going to work, right? If we're not going to work, the women will go to the mines. I remember how they used to wear those onesies with a casket on their heads, and they would do a bunch of things, welding and mining, and, you know, that's how we grew up. We grew up singing, our dad's going to work in the tractor, our mum's going to make cakes at home. And all of a sudden, our mum is on the tractor and our dad is making the cakes in our household because he's left jobless. So now sit there and bake cakes as a man at home. Because, you know, it also happened that men can now take post-birth holidays. After your wife gives birth, the men can now stay at home as well. The moment when we combine the idea, and I told my kids as well, and I told the youth of our church, the moment we can combine the ideas with the salaries and stuff like that, that's not the problem, because we can be right financially, but we induce a state of mind that will be disastrous for our family, for our church, and for society. I'm not saying that it might not be better off financially for both of them to work. Just like a brother of ours said yesterday when I spoke to him. He says, my wife has a £6,000 a month salary and I only bring home 2,500, 3,000. Should I tell her to stop working because I can sustain the family with my 2.5 grand salary when she earns 6? That's a tough decision to make, right? It's hard to say. And he says, I'm the hen, I sing in my house, right? When your wife earns more than double. Really? What type of hen? How are you going to sing in your household as a hen, as a rooster? I know that the subject isn't very healthy to speak about, but you know, as Daniel Bogdan used to say, we need to ring the alarm bells. Surely we can speak about those boys that sit excessively and play video games. 70% of those who play video games are boys and 30% are females, girls. Girls now with more courage, for example, from Beiuș we have a 23-year-old girl who became world champion at Counter-Strike. Well done, you achieved a great achievement with this girl. Boys play long games that last for years. Girls play short games. When they stop playing video games, the girls, they move on to the next level in real life. And suddenly you wake up that you have a man, when he was a boy, he started playing computer games, and you married him, and he's on level 4, for example. He carried on playing, and he didn't even realize that he's married. His head is still in the game, running around after enemies with a bat in the woods, a gun, or whatever, and he's still hunting, killing his enemies. They no longer sleep. Nowadays, men no longer sleep as much. For a boy to grow up, your boy who's 18, I don't know if you guys know, he needs 8 hours of sleep a night to grow healthily. The amount of sleep that boys get in Romania nowadays is on average about 6.5 hours. They go to school as zombies. What can you do with him as a teacher? What can you teach him? How could you speak to him? It's like he came from New Year's Eve every day to school, staying up all night long. These people, these men confront with obesity issues. They eat shawarmas and kebabs filled with everything to the brim. We have fast foods at every street corner. And the sedentary nature of our jobs nowadays, to sit in an office all day long, and excessive urbanization, to drive around all day long, they consider it a curse. To walk up a hill to get to their house, they want to drive and park it right outside. No more exercise. Half of the youth in Romania can't do more than 5 proper push-ups. A third of American teenagers aren't apt to do military training at all. So in America, America needs to build as many nuclear weapons as possible, because they do not have the personnel to fight if a war ever came against them. They're not like the Chinese. The Chinese have a lot of people ready to fight and able to do military training. But these guys, when they weigh 500 kilograms, they consider the army to be the worst thing possible. How are you going to train them to be soldiers? They're diabetics, have hormonal problems. I was reading a report that said, speaking about the Neo-Protestant church, the youth have sexual relations at least once a month, twice a month. They have, like I said, hormonal problems. They're impotent. They fight with impotence. If back in the old days Viagra was publicized for old men, nowadays Viagra is being advertised for younger people, the younger generation. A great part of the men of today that should be the men of tomorrow haven't cut their umbilical cord from their mothers. They're dependent and reliant on their mothers even after they get married. Their marriage is a disaster because he is still attached to his biological mother and cannot detach himself from her at all. He cannot do anything without his mom. He rings her up to ask for her advice, her opinion, how he should act, what he should do. They have problems with pornography addiction because they become impulsive. They have a inferiority complex given out of pornography, all types of inhibitions. Do not forget that a bunch of them start their sexual life, like I said, a lot earlier than before. Some at the age of 12, 13, 14, and when they get married at the age of 20 or so, 20 plus, they don't want to have sex anymore. For example, younger people that get married in Japan, the 20-year-olds in Japan that get married, they only have sex 2-3 times a year. They don't want to do it anymore. They don't feel like doing it. So where are the men who once were? We again start from the principle that women wanted to change men and they don't like the change that they have brought, and so they ask themselves, where are the men that once were? A lot of our boys nowadays face problems with drug addiction. They started off drinking Coke, moved on to Red Bull. Due to the state of agitation that they had, they started taking and using joints to try and relax, and have then moved on to softer drugs, then harder drugs. Metabolically speaking, I don't know what will happen with this generation that no longer eats normal food anymore, but they eat crisps and drink soft drinks, a bunch of processed foods. They don't like eating healthily. They don't eat naturally. Even if you like eating healthier alternatives, they're not truly healthy out of the ground, out of a proper farm. Vegetables grown in greenhouses and with chemicals and various ways. A lot of this generation had to deal with missing fathers that have left, ran away from home, brought up by single mothers, or fathers that out of a desire to bring a better life for their children went to work in a foreign country, and for the sake of a greater salary, a better life for their children, fathers have left home when they needed role models. And yes, the fathers came back and brought them nicer toys, nicer clothes, nicer things. But those boys grew up without a father in their household. And when the boy grew up, boys asked their mother, where's your dad? Where's my dad, sorry? Oh, your dad. He either went off to work to support us, or I don't know who your dad is. You were born out of wedlock. At school, for example, when they come back home, and as a dad, for example, I punish my child because he got a bad grade at school. Suddenly, the kid can now call Child Protective Services, and my boy gets taken away from home. I can no longer punish my children at home when they do something stupid because they can now call Child Protection Services. Or I, as a father, I can no longer hug my child and give him a kiss on the forehead or on the cheek because someone might think that I'm a pedophile and again call the Child Protection Services. My parents, for example, would arguably, amorally, would beat me, for example, or our parents, other parents in the church, right? Do you remember 50 years ago when our parents would beat us because we'd come back home with dirty trousers or broken shoes? And do you guys remember when we used to lie to our parents? Or when we used to do like more serious stuff, right? We used to get beaten, punished so hard, and nowadays we can't do that anymore. The great tragedy of young families with children, they tell me, Pastor, we can't allow ourselves to punish our kids too harshly, especially in demented countries like the Scandinavian ones or more westernized and developed countries. If you look at your child in an aggressive way, you can face up to 2 years of prison, of jail. Your own child solves you out, resolves your problems, your issues, sends you to jail. I don't know, it's hard, it's tough. The failure of marriages in London has really made me think about these issues. A woman who's alone has more benefits than a married couple, a married woman. And so it's slowly and quietly encouraged divorce. She has a child. If I kick his dad out the house, for example, and I divorce him and I'm just left with my child, I'll earn a lot more money from benefits and live a lot better life. And so, quietly, the government has encouraged divorce. I don't know if you guys know, statistically, most divorces are introduced and initiated by women. Only 30% of men that divorce initiate the divorce. I'm not talking about whether they are right or wrong, because maybe those wild men, like I said before, that beat their wives or whatever and committed adultery and cheated and whatnot, there might be valid reasons for why the women have asked for divorces. I'm just speaking statistically that 70%, most of the divorces are launched and started and initiated by women. And when we speak about the custody of children, only 10% of custodies are given to the men. 90% of cases, the child is left with the mother. The children are left with the mother. And I read a report that said, for example, a few days ago, that of those men that commit suicide because of divorces, 60 to 70% of them commit suicide. Sorry, of those that commit suicide after a divorce, 70% of those that do commit suicide are men and 30% are the women. Why? When you feel like the world has narrowed itself and you're left without a wife, without a children, your family is broken, the husband, the man, the ex-husband better said, is now left without kids. He's all alone. He can do what he wants. Commit suicide. No one relies on him anymore. Now, as a woman, you can't commit suicide because you have children. You have children to look after. And you've divorced him and the government has given you money. Right, you're living good off benefits, but your child is now raised without a father, without a male role model in his life. And you're raising the future Tom girl. A woman must have femininity. I wish that for the women in our church. But you need to be the enemies of the feminist movement who has ultimately destroyed God's order in our families and our households. God's order said that the husband, the man, is the head of the family, the head of the woman. And feminism has destroyed this. There's female quotas everywhere. In films, for example, there needs to be at least this amount of women in the films, in the movies. And preferably the woman to beat up some big bulky men. That would physically, in the real world, be almost impossible. I saw a Viking movie recently, for example. Vikings in Valhalla, Scandinavians, there was a black man amongst them. And historically, I really don't know how you can have a black man in the faraway north in the middle of the snow in Scandinavia. But you couldn't have a movie just with blonde people and blue eyes. You need a quota. You need to have certain races, genders in the movie. Minimum quotas in the workplace. In universities, there needs to be at least this many women teachers, female teachers, just like Andrei Șerban, one of the greatest directors in Romania that we had. Please go check and you'll see, for example, the disaster in the world that we live in. The biggest Romanian director, Andrei Șerban, is kicked out of the biggest American university visual that teaches people audio and visual. I forget the course that he was teaching. And he says the following: you kick me out of university and you say that I'm not a good teacher, and you put a woman in my place just because you want to have at least a minimum female quota. So they're kicking out male teachers that are good for their job, right? Maybe more qualified than the woman. I'm not talking about qualifications right now. Let's say maybe the female was qualified to be there, but you're put there, and someone gets fired from their job, and you're hired as a woman just because the quota needs to be hit. And people who are more qualified get fired for a woman to get put in his place. I'm not saying women shouldn't work there, but I'm arguing that you should be qualified for your job. Hire the most qualified person, regardless of their gender. In toilets now, there's now multiple toilets, in order not to discriminate. For men, for women, and for whoever else. We live in quite a crazy world nowadays. In all the movies that our boys see, they see, like I said, females beating up the big, bulky, masculine guys. These women that can beat 20, 30 men at once and lay them out straight on the ground. And you're horrified. How could you possibly marry someone like this? You'll get beaten up in your own household. Right? And last week, the Americans realized that something's not quite right. A group of women came out and said that they do not agree for Dracula to be a man. Now they want a movie with Dracula where Dracula is played by a woman, because it's not correct politically otherwise. Why can Dracula not be a woman? Right? But this wasn't the biggest problem. But suddenly, men don't know what to do anymore. Let's see what the solutions are. And we want to move on to I want to move on to the practical area of my sermon today and see what we can do. Firstly, talk to the women in our church. Talk to the women in the church. Talk to our girls. And turn back to the scripture. Women, please turn back to the scriptures. Be a woman according to the scriptures. Talk to your husbands, women. And allow him to be the head of the family. Otherwise, your families will go haywire and there will be complete chaos. When your husband says no to your kids, you as a woman, as the wife, as a mother, say no to your kids as well. Be in agreement with your husband, even if you don't agree with him. Take him aside into the bedroom afterwards and speak to him and say, why did you say no? And talk to him about him. But when you're in front of your kids, be of the same opinion as your husband. Don't play good cop, bad cop. Because then that ruins your family. Oh, your dad said you can't have £10. Here, come to mommy. Come, look, I have £10 in my purse. Take it in your pocket. When your dad says, wake up, it's time for church, you as a mother go, no, let him sleep a bit more. Don't pull the rug from underneath your husband. Don't pull the chair from underneath your husband, the father of your children. The female needs to subdue itself to the husband. That means to willingly adhere to him. Yes, he snores. Yes, he's bold. He has a huge belly. Yes, he's ugly. He's this. He's your husband. You chose him. I believe in Arminianism, not in Calvinism. I don't believe that God has punished you with him. I believe that you have free willingly chose him. Everything's on the basis of choice. So stick with him. Don't perpetrate this state to your kids as well and destroy them. Even though you're right, even though you're smarter than than him, you're wiser than him, even though you bring more money into your household than him. Don't make him feel inferior, because he'll transmit this onwards to his kids. And we will no longer find men in our churches anymore in 20 years' time to make them pastors and leaders, husbands and fathers. Every day we hear quotas, cursed be the quotas. We hear how some female policemen, women were beaten up in Romania. Everyone's beating them up. The gypsies, the Romanians, the dogs, everyone beats up the female police. Why? Because they are a quota. They're not actual police women. They don't have that authority in them. They can't impose it. They can't impose their authority over criminals. Criminals look at a lot of these female cops and laugh at them. Return to the Bible. Return to the scriptures. Have children and row on the left-hand side of the boat. Obligate and force your husband to get out of the house, to work, to not become a Jacob who's so attached to his mother. I want to speak to you men as well. Men, return to the scriptures. Esau was outside, right? Hunting, all sweaty, all, working, bringing back lambs and goats to his father. And Jacob was next to his mother's boy. Kick him out the house. Don't let your boy sit next to you in the kitchen and whisper to you sweet nothings and speak to you about petroleum reds and turquoise and blues, and kick him out the house. Go help your dad out. Your dad's fixing the car. Go hold the torch for him. Hold the torch for your dad. Go bring him the tools from the shed. Go walk the dog. Do whatever. Go out and about. Go exercise. Go play some football. Go. As a mother, please push your children to do boyish activities. How should I say this? I remember when I was young, there were dogs, stray dogs everywhere. They would bite me. I bit a couple dogs back. Make your husbands be the head of your family, and if he's not, teach him to be a head of the family. And respect him in front of your kids, in front of your family, in front of God. Fathers, secondly, spend time with your boys. Push the girls back in the household with their mothers, no matter how much she wants to wear boots and be with you and work with you. Push your daughters inside the house with their mothers, because your daughters will get married and won't know how to cook. Make a simple omelette for their husbands. You mothers, teach girls to do girly activities. That's why we need to have meetings with the sisters in the church, according to Titus, to learn how to love their husbands, to learn how to cook, come with a chef here and teach them how to cook. Because you cannot live a whole life long, you can't live a life just eating salami and biscuits. And teach them how to set the table. I don't want to speak any stupid stuff, but I'm willing to bet that half the women here in our church don't know what side the fork and the spoon should be on, and the knife and the... Teach them how to behave, how to walk, how to live, how to... Teach them that the decisions that they take nowadays can be disasters tomorrow. Teach them to put the correct building blocks down. Let the men do the biblical study, and you females, the Bible says very clearly, I do not allow women to teach in the church. Stop stepping past the Bible. You try to push this verse back and have done Bible studies. Let the men do the Bible studies. You guys should teach each other how to be women. And you guys, teach your boys how to be men. Fathers, teach your boys how to be men. You as fathers, step away from the computer and enter the real world. Walk through the woods with them, walk through the mountains, practice sports with them. Physical exercise. Oh Lord, where have we ended up? Our great issue and problem has been for many years that we have not had any free time. How can we make some free time? How can we create free time? We have free time, but now our great problem is, what are we going to spend our free time on? Are we going to sit inside and watch TV, everyone around the screen, around a monitor? Eating crisps, and buy a gun, buy a slingshot, buy, I don't know, shoot for birds. Young Kranga put his job of a pastor at risk, shooting birds off the cross on his church. Men, boys should find a mentor. They need role models in their life and they don't have enough of them. I want to let you guys know that we need to step out the house with our kids and take them out. We spend too much time at home. A man doesn't have what to do at home except when he comes and eats and goes to bed. Other than that, men should be out and about, whistling, exploring, working. Believe me, that's where our place is. That is where our place is, and our kids need to see this. Please ensure this happens. Dress as men. Wash, amen. Wash, be men and smell of aftershave. Don't transform them into little girls. Maybe you wanted for a long time to have a girl and you only have boys. Don't transform those boys into women, for you will destroy your future family and your future grandkids. When you see your boy walking with heels, every boy walks in heels at least once in their life, right? You find your mother's heels, you walk in them. Don't let him carry on walking in heels. Take them off him. Boys, go to the army. Go to the army. You have to go to the army. Go to the army. Look what the Ukrainians did. They fled and they ran away from their countries and others came to fight in their place. Mercenaries and... Anyway. But the men, the boys, a lot of them fled, ran away from Ukraine, wanted to run away from the war, and sometimes it's impossible. When war is at your door, you need to fight, and that's our job as men to do. I want to end by saying just this. Where are the men? Where are the men who once were? The answer is they are where we want them to be. Where are the women? They are where we want them to be. There's a bunch of solutions. The boys asked me, do we have solutions to this? But for this, we need to recognize that we have a problem. And this is just what I wanted to say today, that we have a problem. We face a problem. The man needs to be a man in order for the woman to be a woman. And women need to be women in order for men to be men. Nowadays, women can take leadership positions in our churches and they can work and they can do a bunch of extraordinary jobs at church. Women can teach other women how to live, how to work, how to love their husband, how to behave, how to do this and that, for them to not have two faces, for them to not have, for them how to dress properly out in public, how to honor their husbands, how to be decent women, how to be a biblically strong women. Biblically strong women. You cannot live in one way at home and in a different way out in public. The woman needs to be liked by her husband, not liked by men. Needs to be liked by her husband, by her man, not by men in general. The moment when Christ is up there and the man is next and then the women and then the children, please believe me that everything functions in harmony. When we pull one of them out of order, everything falls down crumbling. And I like us all to pray now. I like us all to pray for her and say, God, please make my husband a proper husband. As a husband, make me a father, the father that I need to be, the man that I need to be. Biblically, help me be a strong woman. Help me be a mother, a wife. Help me grow, dear Lord. Help me grow in you, in the order that you have set out in my family. As parents, help us grow our children. Help us grow as boys. Help us grow our boys as the men that they need to be tomorrow, and our daughters as the wives and the mothers that they need to be tomorrow. Don't let us be children who have never grown up. Children at the age of 30 who got married with another child and have kids of our own now. Men and women who are still children, boys and girls, who have reached the age of 30, 40, and now have their own kids. How can kids grow kids? How can blind lead blind people? Jacobs who are 40-year-old children, who cook with their mothers, right? Jacob, 40-year-old child who cooks with his mum, who deceives, lies to his dad, runs away, meets with Laban, who is a scam artist, makes him marry the wrong girl, makes him work for 14 years for him. And yet God, out of this metrosexual boy, turned him into a real man. turned him into a man. I'd like us all to stand up now and I'd like us to pray. Let's all enter prayer. Amen.